Thank you everyone for being here and Sylvain for the presentation. Well, today we have Sylvain Petit. He's a professor of economics at the Université Polytechnique, Hauts de France. He specializes in tourism economics and applied econometrics. His research focuses on international tourism flows and the development of regional destinations. He was elected member of the International Association for Tourism Economics Executive Committee for 8 years and is currently vice president of the Association Française de Management du Tourisme. And he will present his work about the gravity model for tourism flows, considering the non-homothetic nature of the demand. Well, Sylvain, you can share now your presentation.
Okay.
You want?
Okay. Do you see the presentation?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot, Augustina and Serena, for the organization and for the invitation. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. And I'd like also to thank Maria for suggesting that I contribute to this seminar. So I hope you can hear me well, and I apologize in advance because I have a poor level and a very poor accent in English. So I will probably speak slowly to try to be as clear as possible. So I'm professor in economics in the Polytechnique University of Hauts-de-France. So it's in the university. It is on the city of Valenciennes, so in the north in the France. And so today I'm going to present a paper concerning the use of the gravity model on the tourism. And more precisely, I will try to explain how to take into account the non-homotheticity in the tourism demand. So this is a draft, and this paper is co-written with 3 other colleagues: Vincent Dropsy from the University of French Polynesia, Jean-Jacques Novak from the University of Lille, again in the north of France, and Monder Sali from the University also of French Polynesia. So, in the beginning, for the introduction, I hope that you know a little bit what is the gravity model, but just to be quick, so the gravity model was created 1 century ago by Zipf and after by Whaley in order to explain the trade between different cities in United States. The idea is very simple. It's that means that the trade between 2 cities is proportional to the mass of the city, probably the economic masses, and inversely proportional to the distance between these 2 cities. And this approach of the gravity model became very popular during the 70s and the 80s in order to explain international trade in the context of globalization. And on the beginning of this century, the academic literature on tourism started to use this approach, with Matthias in 2004, Garin Munoz in 2006, Durbari in 2008, Gaderou and Sitana in 2008, and Witz in 2012. So here you have the last papers, the last important papers in the academic literature in tourism, which use the gravity model. So, for example, Morley and al. In Annals of Tourism Research in 2014, they proposed an important theoretical contribution to the academic literature based on the individual utility theory in order to understand how the bilateral links, so between the destination and the source country of the tourist, so how these bilateral links affect the tourism demand. In 2019, with Nilu Sitaran, in a paper published in a Journal of Travel Research, we proposed a gravity model in order to take into account the cultural affinity from the tourist for a destination in the tourism demand. More recently, Arben Basil, in current issue in tourism, proposed an important contribution by taking into account the effect of the multilateral resistance to tourism. Indeed, as we shall see later, the academic literature, not particularly in international trade, strongly recommends to take into account the multilateral resistance of a country at the risk of biasing estimates of the bilateral effects. For example, it is not so much the distance between two countries that is important, but the degree of the geographical remoteness of a country. Inchosti, Sintes, and al. In a paper published in 2021 in current issue in tourism, they estimated the income elasticity of the different tourists, so according to their origin, for their visit in the Balearic Islands and the Canary Islands. Their estimations are based on the use of a gravity model, and they show that that income elasticity can change according to the country of origin, and that the elasticities depends generally on the country's level of economic development. So thanks to this approach, these authors show that income elasticities are also different between these two destinations. Indeed, the Balearic Islands have twice the income elasticity of the Canary Islands, which could be due to a greater diversification of tourist experiences, more islands to visit, more activities, etc. And recently, Nadal and Gallego, so in 2022, in a paper published in Journal of Economic Survey, so they provided a survey of the academic literature concerning the use of the gravity model in order to study tourism. They show that the research focus on quantifying the effect of a specific determining factor to assess the impact for a certain phenomenon, disease, climate change, corruption, etc., or a policy, tourist tax, visa policy, etc., on the tourism demand. So Nadal and Gallego indicate that from a theoretical standpoint, it is probably individual utility and not the company benefits which underlies tourist behavior. So the issue of a pertinent measure of tourism demand is also problematic, according to them, and controversial, because tourism demand represents both an amount of expenditures and quality of consumption. So the data based on arrivals are more useful for some authors, as these kind of data are more available than expenditures. And more important, Nadal and Gallego point out that the effects of multilateral resistance are not sufficiently taken into account in the work on tourism. And if it is the case, it is only based on the inclusion on countries' fixed effect. For this reason, they conclude with this sentence: it seems that gravity models for tourism are a step behind to empirical applications for trade. So, in order now to understand the aim of this presentation, what are the main basic assumptions of the gravity model? First of all, we assume that we have iceberg type trade cost. So the price notably are the same according the origin and the destination. So there is no difference if you go to point B from a point A than the opposite. Second point, we have a weak separability. That means that the goods are homogeneous inside a sector. So the products are the same. But we can assume that each country already offers a different good. But more important, we assume with the gravity model that we have a nonhomotheticity of the preferences. That means that tourism demand can be approximated by the use of a representative agent of consumers. So basically, incomes are the same in the country of origins, and so incomes are equally distributed. However, mathematically, if we assume that we have a homotheticity of the preferences, that means that we have always an income elasticity of the demand equal to 1. And for the case of the tourism, this is very problematic because, as you know, the international tourism is a luxury good, and we have many work in the literature, Crouch, Pengenal, Untongenal, or more recently, Günther and Smeral or Smeral. All of this work, and there is a lot of another work that I didn't cite here, but all of these works found that the income elasticity in the particular case of the international tourism is superior to 1. So that means that we have the international tourism is a luxury good. So according to us, the standard gravity models is not suitable in order to study the tourism sector, the tourism flows. And so the gravity models have to rely on nonhomothetic preferences, even if we take into account the multilateral resistance of the countries. So we have to take into account the income per capita of the different countries, but also the income distribution in the same variable in order to measure these non-homothetic preferences. So for that, in the literature, in international trade, provide a very interesting paper, so published in 2016 by Galbon and Candelval in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. So they propose the gravity equation of international trade relying on non-homothetic preferences. In order to construct this model, they combine an IDS, almost ideal demand system approach, with a multi-sector trade model. So I will present more in detail this model just after. But this is interesting because the IDS approach is not new for the tourism sector. We have a different paper which use this kind of approach. And this approach, for example, was used in not recent paper, for example, by Ann-Durberry and Sinclair in tourism management in 2006. They use this approach for the American tourists who visit different European destinations. Papa Theodorou studied the case of the international tourists when they visit the Mediterranean region, so in a paper published in Applied Economics. IDS approach, the main idea of this approach is to understand the proportion of income that the consumer, so the tourist here, spends for good or for services or for a destination. So this is the main idea. We will use this idea in the gravity model. So in order to conclude this long introduction, the aim of our paper is to use the gravity model from Galbon and Candelval with the non-homothetic part in order to study the determinants of the tourism flows. And as you will see, we will focus on the particular case of the intra-European tourism flows. So the theoretical framework. So we have to make some assumptions in order to begin. So we assume that the tourism product is differentiated by country of destination. So we are in a case of Armington assumption. And so here we try to explain the tourism expenditures shares of an importing country. So that means of a destination. So we assume that that the tourist follows a multi-stage decision process. First of all, the tourist, the consumer, allocates their consumption expenditures between total tourism consumption and the consumption of the other goods and services. In the second step, the tourist allocates its expenditures between tourism in Europe and the other region. And we focus here on the third step. So that means that we follow this step. That means that the tourists make their decisions among the alternative destinations in Europe. Why in Europe? Our theoretical model can be applied for other area, but we will focus on the Europe because we have the data for the tourism flows in Europe. So, as I said, we begin with an IDS approach. So we have N countries, so that means N tourism services. And so the IDS model is defining over tourism services and the countries I importing from country J. So Sij is the share of aggregate expenditure in the country I allocated to tourism services from country J. And mathematically, the sum of all of these shares must be equal to 1 for each importer I. Alpha is a parameter influencing the expenditure share. P, so are the prices of all the tourism services imported from countries J prime with the substitution parameters gamma. So the semi-elasticity of the expenditure share in service J with respect to the price of service J prime. Y high denotes the real income of importer I with beta G, the semi-income elasticity of the expenditure share in good or destination J. As is, it is common in the IDS estimation, the real income can be measured incorporating an income distribution across consumers so that it becomes following the approach by Farge-Gelban and Candelwall. We assume the substitution parameters gamma are the same between services from different sources. So we have, in fact, this equation 3. So with gamma superior to 0, because it's being the elasticity of substitution across exporters, and N being the number of exporters, so the number of destinations. So the adding up restriction that all budget shares sum to unity implies that the sum of alpha is equal to 1. Homogeneity requires that sum of gamma is equal to 0. So finally, the sum of the beta have to be equal to 0 also. Then we assume iceberg cost of trade. So the international prices reflect domestic prices in the exporter adjusted for iceberg cost. And when we combine equation 2 and 3 into the equation 1 for the expression of the price and the income identity, we obtain the equation 4 of the import shares in the source country I that can be expressed like that. So here, mathematically, the parameter, the variable yj is equal to the sum of xij, and the sum of yg is equal to ye, so the total tourism exports within the sample, and comparing all transactions of tourism services among the countries included in the analysis. So here, as I said, it is important to remember that I is the importing country of tourism services, and I am not sure that I have I was clear. Maybe I made a confusion between ing just before. But so I is the importing country, so the source country of the tourist, and J is the exporting country, so the destination. So ACE IG is a share of tourism services exported by the country J in total countries I's imports of tourism services from the sample. So that gives Y I, so the expenditure share of country I on the tourism in country J. So, and finally, one parameter that I didn't present, maybe if I can, no. Y J divided by Y E, so on the beginning, on the part on the right of the equation 4, so YG divided by YE measure the supply capacity of the exporter. So we have two parts in this equation, a gravity part and a non-homotheticity part. First of all, for the gravity part, we have a variable of distance, dig. So we calculated dig with the distance between these two countries, and we divided by the average distance of the country I with all the other countries in the sample. And we take into account the effect of the multilateral resistance of this country with the other country in the second part of this expression. We did something close for the two other variables of the gravity part. So BIG, so BIG is for the border, a common border, and LIG for a common language between the two countries. So here we have in the expression of B, for example, delta. So delta B is just a dummy variable. It is set to 1 if countries I and J share a common border, and 0 if they do not share a border. In the same way, delta L is set to 1 if countries I and J speak the same language. Not officially, but sometimes there is the same language for ethnic reasons. So BIG measures the tariff equivalent of the trade cost when two countries share a border. LIG measures the tariff equivalent of trade cost when two countries share a common language. But as you can see, DIG, BIG, and LIG are defined to take into account the multilateral resistance. So the bilateral factors matter relative to multilateral forces in order to don't have biased estimations. So it's close to the idea of to include multilateral resistance to tourism, as it was suggested by Arb and Basil in 2020. For the second part, for the part of non-homotheticity, so we have a coefficient beta and the variable omega. Beta G is the exporter specific income semi-elasticity of tourism services. So beta describe the partial effect on the expenditure share of a rise in the relative adjusted real income of the importing countries omega I. So omega I is calculated on the importing country, but beta is estimated on the exported country. So omega is calculated with this expression. It captures omega, the importer, so country I, inequality adjusted real income relative to the other countries. So here, once again, with the multilateral resistance. So X bar is the average of the country I tourism expenditures with the other countries of the sample. And we divide this average tourism expenditures by a stone price index, AI, calculated by using this second expression, as suggested by French-Galban and Candelwal. Sorry. So here P is the price index of the country, and D is the distance between the two countries, with the exponent of rho I will explain just after the this coefficient of rho. And we add after X bar I divided by the stone price index, the sum of I is just an expression, which means it is the TIL index. The TIL index in order to capture the income inequality of the importing country I. So the richer, if I take this expression, the richer the importing country, so the higher X bar I divided by AI, or the more unequal it is, so the TIL index, the higher TIL index is, the larger its expenditures share in tourism products with positive income elasticity. So that means, in this case, we have a beta superior to 0. So we have two possibilities, in fact. For income elastic or luxury goods, we have beta G superior to 0. That means that a higher adjusted real income conduct to the fact that the country source have a higher share of tourism services from the country J. And on the opposite, for income in inelastic goods or goods of necessities, we have beta lower than 0. So that means that a higher adjusted real income conduct for the country source a lower share of tourism services from country J. After that, after this construction, we try to estimate this equation 4. So for that, we mixed the data from different sources. So our data are based on tourism flows between 15 European countries for the period between 2010 and 2019, and for 20 European destinations. So the 15 previous European countries, and we added 5 other European destinations. So the sources are the following. For the tourism expenditures, we use the data from OECD. for the data of tourism arrivals, notably in order to calculate the average of expenditures by origin of tourists. So for the arrivals, we use data from the World Tourism Organization. In order to calculate the TIL index, we use the Gini index from Eurostat. We have also to use GDP per capita from the World Bank, and also the distance variable between the country and also the border, the data of a common border or common language from the CEPI data center. We made some estimation with a robust variance estimation routine, and we added temporal fixed effect. So we try to estimate different models. First of all, a traditional translog model, so without taking into account the non-homotheticity. So just the variable D, B, and L. So for the distance effect, we found a relatively close effect, that's the effect estimated from Funch-Gelbon and Candelwan. So this variable, I repeat that it captures bilateral effect and also the multilateral resistance. For the border and the language variable, it is significantly lower than that it was estimated by Funch-Gelbon and Candelval. However, our sample is not the same. So we use a very particular sample with only European countries with very open borders here. So that's why maybe the coefficients are not so important. After that, so we try to estimate with the variables of omega I. And we tested if the sum of beta is equal to 0. So if this condition is verified. And we try also to estimate with different values for omega, because omega can change according to the value of the stone price index, because it depends on the value of rho. In the academic literature, rho, we recommend to use the value of 0.177 in order to have a consistent result. But it is possible to test other value, and we did that. Notably, we simulate different estimation with a variation to 25% around the value of 0.177. So between 0.132 and 0.221. The results of this estimation are close between the different models, but sometimes we cannot accept the null hypothesis that the sum of beta is equal to 0. So that's why then in the third step, we made estimation, so with again the variables of omega, but under the constraint that the sum of beta is equal to 0. And again with different value of omega. We decided to choose the value of rho that gives estimation closer to an estimation with when we replace so the ratio of X bar divided by the stone price index, replace it by the GDP per capita. So we use the value of 0.221. But so I don't give all the intermediaries results, but the estimation are very close between all of these of the different strategy. So this is the main the results, the final results when we try to integrate the non-homotheticity part of the gravity model and we try also, and we made estimation under the constraint that the sum of beta is equal to 0. So as you can see, we have some country with a beta coefficient beta non-significant. So, and some country with a beta significantly different of 0 and positive. So this is the case of Bulgaria, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Spain. So that means for this kind of countries, for this kind of destination, we can say that we are in a case of luxury good. And for 3 other countries, we have the opposite results with a beta negative. So this is the case for Germany, Lithuania, and also Sweden. So for this kind of country, we can have the conclusion that these destinations are a good of necessity. So finally, how to understand the different values for beta? Some of the values are surprising. Funch-Gelborn and Condelval found that beta depends on the GDP per capita of the exporting country. So for us, we try to see if there is a link between the destination, so the GDP per capita of the destination, so the level of economic development, and their value of semi-income elasticity. And we didn't find any correlation or a link between these two variables. And we tried a lot of other indicators, notably some indicator of tourism competitiveness, the WEF index, and notably the sub-pillar of the resources and cultural endowment, the price by night, the Gini index, etc., etc. And we do not have some conclusive results. We can just note that most of the time, countries with a positive and significant value of beta seem to be the countries with a comparative advantage in tourism. Remember Spain, France, I think Italy also, yes, Italy, Slovakia, Slovenia, etc. And those countries with a negative value seems to have also a comparative disadvantage in tourism. This is the case in the literature, for example, of Germany, or also for Sweden. But it's the only beginning of understanding that we find. So that's very difficult to understand why a country have a beta positive and why another one have a negative beta. Probably, and this is probably the end of my presentation, the value of income elasticity depends also, as it was said in the academic literature, by the tourism strategy of the country. For example, Spain, France, Italy, they have a good tourism diversification. This is not the case for Sweden and Germany and Lithuania. So in conclusion, This paper provides a nonhomothetic gravity equation applied to the tourism sector, and it is based on the IDS approach. We have two parts in this equation. The gravity part with, we take into account the effect of multilateral resistance, and a nonhomothetic part, which is the result of a combination to the real income per capita and the income distribution. Our model permits to measure the semi-income elasticity of 20 destinations according to 15 different categories of tourists. So we have some limitation, and you can see all the fault in my presentation. It's because I finished just 1 hour before this presentation. So, but we have some limitation. The most important limitation is that we made the econometric application based on tourism expenditures. And all of you know that tourism expenditures are based on estimation. It's not based on observation. And but as this model was created for trade, notably so expenditures, we try to find data of tourism expenditures. But I think when we think that this paper provides different perspectives for the economic literature, notably we have to understand the different value of income elasticity for different destinations, and what are the implications of this value in terms of economic policies. Thank you very much for your attention. And so I don't know if I was too quick or too long, but I hope that we have maybe time for discussion. Thank you a lot.
Thank you, Sylvain, for the presentation. You were okay. It's okay. We have time for some questions, if anyone has one. Natalia?
Thank you, Luciana, and thank you, Sylvain, for the presentation. I have a few questions. The first one is that you motivate exactly the paper saying that income elasticity is bigger than 1, so you need to move from the assumption of homothetic preferences. And I was thinking about that perhaps this result is conditioned regarding the type of tourism. So perhaps it's different from business tourism or the type of tourism. I don't know the ocio, ¿cómo se dice ocio in English? Well, the different motivations of the tourism. I think this is very important, and you miss that in the, perhaps you don't have data on that, but as you motivate the paper saying that, I think it is important to notice. The other, this is a comment. Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is that you mentioned that you use iceberg costs, the assumption of iceberg costs. And I think in tourism, perhaps it's not a good assumption, because in tourism, the transport costs are very, very important. So is there a point? There is a point there to say something, I think. And the model, you said I don't remember the names of the authors, but is the model applied to other type of trade of goods and services different from tourism? The model that you use to. And the last question is, you say arrivals. Your dependent variable is expenditure, no? So you mentioned that you use arrivals from the World Tourism Organization, but I don't know where you put, where is arrivals in the equation? And another question is a bilateral flows. You use bilateral flows. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. So I will try to answer to all of your questions, Serena. First comment. You say that income elasticity have to be different according to the motivation, according to the different kind of tourists. I totally agree with your remark, but as you said, it is very difficult to have all the detail according to the main purpose of the visit, for the example, leisure or business or something like that. It's possible maybe for a very small number of countries, maybe 3 or 4, and but probably it's an important perspective for this kind of approach. And in another paper, Maria saw the presentation of this paper last year. We tried also to use this approach according to the different level of quality of the tourism flows. And this is possible, but it's very difficult to merge these two problematic, the how to measure the quality of the tourism flows and how to integrate the non-homotheticity. But I totally agree, and maybe we have to put that for the motivation of the paper. For the iceberg cost assumption in tourism, yeah, I agree with you, but again, it's maybe difficult it's another point, because we try to work on the assumption of homotheticity. And this is another assumption that I think it's a way of research, but in this approach, it's yes, it's a little bit difficult, but probably in the next future, it's another point of research. I totally agree.
Okay.
Franch-Galban and Candelval, so they work on a lot of sectors. So I have the paper here. Just let me check one second. Yeah, there we are. So they use data of balance of payments. And so they have agricultural sectors, industrial sectors, services sectors at a very detailed level. For example, they have this data for the sector of food, beverage, and tobacco, etc. So yes, they have 1, 2, 3, maybe 10 or 15 sectors that they try to measure. They have one category interesting, it is the hotel and the restaurant. But this work has not been merged with the question of income elasticity of the countries. So they the income elasticity of the sector of the hotel restaurant.
Okay.
So that we try to go further in the question of the tourism sector. Finally, why? So, just maybe I can show you again the equation.
Yes.
Of the gravity model. Yeah. Do you see?
Yes.
Okay. Here, so our dependent variable is the share of the tourism expenditures of the country I for the exporting country J. So this is our dependent variable is a ratio. We use rivals data from the World Tourism Organization only in order to calculate X bar.
Okay.
X bar is the average of tourism expenditure of the country I. So we divided the tourism expenditure by the number of arrivals.
Ah, okay, okay, okay.
Thanks a lot, Serena. I enjoy your comments and your question. I will use that for the final version of the paper.
Okay, okay. Thank you for your answer.
Okay. There is anyone that have another question?
Yes.
Maria?
First of all, thank you for your presentation. I think that in tourism economics, we need a lot of work from a theoretic point of view. So thank you for your research. And I have a question about, perhaps you can show again the presentation, because I have a question about how do you calculate the AI, this. Because I understand that it's a price index that you, I
Yes,
would like to know, how do you calculate it?
A stone price index. So here, this is just so the exports of J of the tourist from I to J divided by all the imports of countries for the tourists from I, multiplied by this logarithm. So P is the price level index from the World Bank in order to measure the price of a common basket of goods in the country I compared to the other country in the world. And I think the value of the benchmark value is for United States. And D is the distance between I and J. Rho is so that means that the stone price index is affected by the level of the price, but also by the distance between the countries. And we have this exponent of Rho in the model of Candelval and Fashgenbaum and Candelval. And so that's why we try to make different value for Rho. Because in the literature, they recommend to use the value of 1.177, because it gives some consistent results, notably because they use these parameters in order also to estimate the coefficient of the distance. And so they wanted to have a consistent result for the coefficient of the distance. But us, as we use Rho, and we didn't want to be too arbitrary, we try to simulate different value for.
Okay, thank you. It's a common price index with a common basket of services and goods. It's not a tourist price index.
No.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
This is that means that this is the level of the price of the country for tourists when they visit this country. This is the cost of life, in fact.
Okay, so anyone has another question? No? Talk now? Okay. So, or
it's time
we go.
For the lunch, I think, for you.
Yes.
Okay, well, so thank you very much, Sylvain, for your presentation and for being here with us in this network that we have. Network. Well, hope to see you in another seminar or in another congress. Well, thank you everyone for being here too, and see you in the next seminar.
Okay. Thank you,
Thank you very
Sylvain.
much for this sympathetic invitation. It was a real pleasure. Thank you very much. See
Thank
you
you. Thank you.
next time. Bye
See
bye.
you. See you.